So, you know the drill, questions in the chat, or if you absolutely must, unmute yourself. I have two updates. One, remember we talked about new variants. So it turns out that BA4 and 5 are no longer the predominant variants as of this week, or maybe it was the last week, I don't know. So now we have these two new variants. Well, they're not so new. We talked about them already. It's a hold on, let me give you exactly so I don't screw this up. BQ1 or BQ.1 and then BQ1.1.1. So those are the ones that are now basically nearly 60% combined. The 4 and 5 are still prevalent, but they're rapidly decreasing in prevalence. So what is the significance of this? Well, these are the ones, the BQ1 and 1.1 are the most adaptive, evading the immunity from vaccinations and prior infections. And so basically the sad reality is that the bivalent vaccines are not necessarily protecting against this. So we're not going to expect decreased transmission. That's the bad news. The bad news literally means that the new vaccines they're going to protect against severity, just like the old one, and they're going to protect against the Omicron severity, but they're not going to decrease the transmissibility of the COVID. So we are going to continue to see this. News number one. Let me put that into where I got this. If you want more details, I put that in the chat. And then the other update, that's more of a kind of something we already knew, but I thought it would be good to put particular study, and the link is for the news article, but it summarizes the study. So we already suspected that if you have a COVID second or third or fourth time, that chances are that while it may sound mild, because the variants are mild, but it's actually not. So the chances of long COVID increase with subsequent infections, and actually severity of the follow-up infections seems to be also potentially increasing. This has to do probably with two things. So one is when you have a repeated infections and there are antibodies to the prior infection, you may actually, believe it or not, have in a way stronger but shorter inflammatory response. So the body will know what to do with it, but it will react to it quickly and as stronger. The second probably has to do more with more of an understanding of long COVID, which is when you start accumulating free radicals and oxidative damage from the infection. If that process didn't fully clear up and suddenly have another insult on top, you're simply going to add extra volume of that free radical damage onto already existing level. It gets a bit more complicated. For example, the one of the molecules that we all love and want to have more, glutathione, that cleans some of this garbage, could actually be quite depleted. So if you suddenly have additional insult that you need to try to get rid of, but you're having less of the blocks or less of the tools to do so with, you're going to potentially have a more severe and more protracted illness. So this is the two kind of significant updates that I want to put in there. Basically, what this means: do not decrease prevention measures, especially in upcoming later fall and the winter. Continue masking when you can. Continue avoiding situations if you can, right? So, and be more vigilant about your environment. Certain things are simple, certain things are not. Certain things are unavoidable, so you will go through them, hoping everything will be fine. But nonetheless, just FYI. It also strikes a little different, right? So we kept hearing that, oh, the Omicron is mild, and that it may be true for the initial infection. The question is, if somebody has 2, 3, 4 times, is each time they're going to have milder? The original thought would be, oh yeah, it'll be milder. Turns out that's not actually correct. And that's really the main concern here with this study. Okay, questions. So is surge less likely? I don't know, the numbers are currently flat. It's not necessarily getting a whole lot worse, it's just steady. China eased up some of the lockdowns, saying that they're seeing the surge is milder than they were worried about. So maybe we will not have as bad of the year as we had it last year in the same time this year. So, but I don't know. I told you I will keep tracking, and if I change opinion on what's going to happen if we're going to have a surge, I'll let you know. But I don't have anything new since last one. You're talking about the routers, the one in the routers. You want me to talk about actual study? So I just want to make sure. Long COVID and vaccinated. What study specifically do you mean? Yeah. Yes, find the study and we can talk about it. The one I just posted, I'll give you a little bit more detail since I don't know if that was the question. This was a pretty large collection of data. So they looked at it. This is also a VA study. So they looked into the patients out of the VA between the spring of 2020 and so 2 years, and then April 2020, 2022. And so there were almost 500,000 patients, and more than 40,000 had 2 or more infections. That's what they did. They basically looked at those who had 1 infection versus more than 1. And of course, you'd expect that most of these patients were men because it was inside the VA study. And, basically the patients who were reinfected more than once had almost double risk of death and more than triple risk of hospitalization compared to those who were infected just 1. And then also, like they go through the study also talks about that there were other things as well. It wasn't just the acute morbidity and mortality, but also the long-term consequences. So, take it for what it's worth. So it is, by the way, also the fact that they ended the study in April. So they ended just when the Omicron overtook. So does that going to change in the future? I am not actually convinced that that's the case. So I'm afraid that we're going to see something. It may not be as bad, but it will be something not far off. Okay, let's take a couple more minutes. So maybe let's do these questions that are currently in there and maybe one more. So then we have plenty of time for everything else. Any suggestions to reduce transmissibility besides wearing the masks? Well, stay away from high-risk situations. If you're going to go to a restaurant, try to find a place to sit outside. Yes, it's getting a little chillier, but I think a lot of places the same way going to have the heated outside spaces, I'm guessing, because that does attract more customers. So other than that, you've been through this for a long time, so avoid high-risk behaviors, wear mask when appropriate. So I think that's really all we can do. Okay. Any other question? Maybe it's a good time to end. Perfect. All right. Well, it gives me an immense pleasure to see Delia here. She and I go back, I don't know, 15 years or something. I don't know.
Something like count. That. Yeah.
And so what are you talking about, dear?
We're talking about grief at the holidays.
Important topic. I kind of find that it's also quite essential because today is so I'm going to say a couple of words about that. So today is the Veterans Day. And of course, it's not we think of it as a holiday because we want to honor those who serve, but of course, it's also not an easy holiday because it's not an easy topic since a lot of the vets do have a lot of problems, and it is in a way a celebration of often someone else's suffering in a sense, right? And so I think it's very appropriate that we pick this topic today, and I do want to acknowledge that today is the day. So with that, Delia, take us to the topic.
Terrific. Thank you so much. Thanks for inviting me, everybody. I'm going to share my screen here. I'm a palliative care doctor, integrative palliative care doctor, and I really appreciate being invited to this wonderful group. Okay, I'm going to share. Can you guys see it? Yep, great. Okay, so the first thing to say about grief in general, holidays or any other time, is that whatever's happening for you, it's okay. So we sometimes have expectations about how it's going to go, that it will be hard in the beginning and then get easier over time in a straight line. And while grief can get easier over time, it's often not in a straight line. So there are days and times that are better and days and times that are worse, and that's perfectly fine. And I think the other thing to think about is that sometimes at the holidays, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to be a certain way, to be joyous, to make experiences for other people that are happy. And it's okay if you don't want to do that. It's okay if it's not exactly as you wished it would be. It's okay if you don't feel the holiday spirit. All of that stuff is okay. So this is an important concept for grief, but for life also, which is this, that our feelings often have a thought behind them, and we may not be aware of the thought, but the feelings can drive our behavior. So this concept is really important for managing how we feel. So when we have a feeling, oh, we're really angry about something, or we're really sad about something, or we're feeling hopeless about something, and maybe we act in a certain way, we cry, or we withdraw, or we snap at somebody, almost always there is a thought behind that feeling that we often don't recognize. So for example, oh, I'm feeling sort of blue and down and, awful. And my behavior maybe is that I withdraw from family and friends. The thought behind that might be something like, terrible things always happen to me. And the reason it's important to pay attention to what that thought is that if it's not a helpful, positive thought for us, there's something we can do about that. And we all tend to have scripts like that show up over and over and over again in our life. We have different ones, but they may be things like, nothing ever works out for me, or people don't care about me, or I'm not good enough, or I'm not lovable enough, or people should do it my way. So thoughts that are kind of hidden, but affect how we feel and affect what we do. And once we shine the light on those thoughts, we can do a whole lot of good at getting rid of the ones that don't serve us. So here's an example. The 3 C's are kind of a trick for catching ourselves with those thoughts that don't serve us. So the idea is that we catch the thought, we check it, like, is this a helpful thought? Do we like this thought? And then if we don't think it's helpful, then we change it. So for example, a thought that one might have, maybe particularly around the holidays, if grief is a part of your experience, is, I'll never be happy again. Or everything about the holidays this year is going to be terrible. So if we have that thought, we want to think these 2 questions. Is it true and is it helpful? So when we have a thought, we want to ask ourselves, is it true and is it helpful? So I'll never be happy again. Everything about the holidays this year will be terrible. So we're going to ask ourselves, is that true and is it helpful? So I'll never be happy again. Is that likely to be true? No, right? That's unlikely to be true. And is it helpful to us when we're in an experience, which the holiday times, it just is, for us to get stuck in that idea of, I will never be happy again? Is that helpful to us in terms of our well-being, our oxidative stress on our body, our anxiety and depression, our ability to sleep, our energy, our connections with other people? It is absolutely not helpful. How about everything about the holidays this year will be terrible? Is that true? No. Will it be hard? Sure. But everything about the holidays be terrible this year? No, that's probably not true. And is it helpful? Certainly it's not helpful. And so when we check these kind of hidden unhelpful thoughts and we say, you know what, that is not true or not helpful, we replace it with a different thought on purpose. And when you first practice this, it feels forced and dumb, but the more you do it, the better you get at it. And even if while you're doing it, you think it doesn't work, it still works. So it's okay if you force yourself to do this and you think it's kind of dumb, it actually still helps. So let's take the first one. I'll never be happy again. We decided it's not true. It's not helpful. So we might say to ourselves something like, this is hard, but I'm strong and I have great support. So is it true that this is hard? Yes. Is it helpful to think about the fact that you're strong and you have great support? Yes, actually, that's helpful. So everything about the holidays would be terrible this year. We decided we don't think that's true. It's certainly not helpful. How about instead, the holidays are going to be kind of hard this year, but I'll keep my eyes open for the bright spots. So it acknowledges, yeah, it's going to be hard. We're not saying it's not going to be hard. It's going to be hard, but I'll keep my eyes open for the bright spots is so very different than everything's going to be terrible no matter what. So we're going to catch ourselves with these hidden unhelpful thoughts, check, do we think it's true? Do we think it's helpful? And then change that thought on purpose. In writing, if you can make yourself do it, is even more powerful. Speaking it is great, but even just replacing it in your mind, that's okay too. So I really highly recommend you practice this. This is really, of course, not just for holiday time and not just for grief. This is for all of us all the time to help us uncover our unhelpful, untrue thoughts and replace them with ones that are more positive and productive for us. So the next, this is my sweet baby dog. The next question when we're dealing with hard things, all hard things, including grief at the holidays, is how full is your cup? Meaning your emotional cup, your physical cup, your spiritual cup. Some people say your gas tank, because if we're empty, if we're depleted, hard things are harder. And if you're experiencing grief at the holiday time, that's hard. And so it will be harder if your cup is empty. So we want to think about two things when we think about how to fill up our cup so that we can do hard things, so that the hard things aren't quite as hard. And there's really two parts to this equation. One is what empties your cup. So the bottom of this picture are the things that empty your cup. What depletes you? And then the top is what can you put into the cup that will fill up your cup? Because the equation for it being empty are both of those things, right? Maybe something is emptying it and not enough is filling it. So when we're trying to make it better, we want to address both sides. So here's an example. And this is an exercise I really recommend that you actually do yourself. Draw yourself a little cup. The top is what fills it. The bottom is what empties it. And here's an example of what that might look like. So what are the things that might fill your cup? Cooking, doing yoga, listening to music, taking a walk, having a gratitude ritual of some sort where you think about the things for which you're grateful, reading, meditating, spending time with your family, spending time with your pets, spending time outside. There are all kinds of things that could fill your cup. And I recommend if you do this exercise that you do not just the things you're currently doing that fill your cup, but the things you could do that you know would fill your cup. Like, well, I used to do Tai Chi and that was really great. I haven't done it in a long time. Put Tai Chi in there. You know, I've always wanted to learn to crochet. Put that in there. So anything that you can think of that fills up your cup, put that on the top. And then look at the bottom part of the things that drain or empty your cup. So what might those be? Too much TV, worrying, that's a big one. Eating things that aren't good for you, isolating from people and being alone too much. Although for some people, being alone fills their cup. So it's not about the thing. No one can say what's the thing that fills or empties your cup. Work, for example, for some people, work empties their cup. For some people, it fills their cup. So what you're really trying to figure out for yourself is what fills you up and what empties you. And try to find as many things on the bottom as you can of what is emptying your cup. Now, some of those will be unchangeable. And that's just how it is. Some of those will be unchangeable. So those aren't the ones we're going to focus on, but some of them will be changeable, right? So if you're eating junk food, worrying a lot and going to bed too late, those things are actually changeable. So I suggest that you do this actual exercise. And then once you fill it up as much as you can, top and bottom, with things that fill your cup and empty your cup, that you circle maybe 2 on the bottom and 2 on the top that you could change. So 2 things on the bottom that empty your cup that you could on purpose do less of. And then 2 things on the top that you could do a little bit more of or start doing. And that's the equation for starting to fill up your cup. And when your cup is full, hard things like holidays are easier. That's the idea. Filling up your cup makes hard things easier. This is my most favorite slide, and I show it all the time when I speak anywhere because it's the whole course in mindfulness, really, which is look at the difference between the person and the dog. The person has what in their mind? Blah, 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 junk, right? Things they have to do, things they're worried about, things that happened, excuse me, things that could happen, problems. They have all kinds of junk in their mind. And look, though, at what the dog has. The dog is not empty. It doesn't have an empty mind. The dog is just in the moment that it is in. It's just in the moment that it is in. That is an advice for us that is one of the most powerful things that we can do, is to be in the moment that we're in, which means not how it used to be or how it could have been, not worries about what might it be in the future, but just the literal moment that we're in right now. So if we're cooking, right now what we're doing is we're cooking. If we're outside watching the grandkids, we're outside watching the grandkids. So that's not to say bad things haven't happened or there aren't things to worry about. Sure, there are. But as much as we can focus on the literal life that we're living in the moment, what we're doing, what we're seeing, what we're feeling, what we're smelling, what we're tasting, the less our distress is present. And so we can imagine that this dog is much less distressed than the person. And we can, who the heck knows what's in a dog's mind, but we can imagine that the dog is not thinking, what if the person stops feeding me? Right? They're not creating negative things that haven't happened yet. They're just being in the moment that they're living. So we should be like the dog. And then I'm going to end the way we started, which is compassion for us. So the idea of self-compassion is that we are often so compassionate to other people and so much less compassionate to ourselves. So think of how we speak to ourselves sometimes. Oh my gosh, I can't believe you did that. You're so stupid. Oh my gosh. Oh, look at you. Oh my gosh. And we almost never speak to people that we love that way. Our best friend, think about your best friend and what you would say to him or her. How would you speak to that friend about something if they made a mistake, if they were crying, if they weren't perky on a certain day because they were grieving, if they were struggling? How would you speak to that person? Literally imagine that. Someone you care about, how would you speak to that person? And then take those words and turn them around and speak those words to yourself. And try to notice if you say unkind things to yourself in your head, that's a time to stop. Literally think, okay, person that I love, my best friend, what would I say to him or her? And then literally say those words back to yourself. It becomes a practice to notice when we're unkind to ourselves and then turn it around and intentionally treat ourselves as if we were someone that we love, because ideally, we are someone that we love. All right, that is my advice for how to get through tough times, grief times at the holidays. And feel free to take a picture of this if you want. Feel free to reach out to me if I can answer a question for you, if you want to talk about any of the things that we just talked about here. or if I can be of support to you in any way. And I'll stop sharing my screen. Thank you guys for letting me share. And I'm going to stay with you for the meditation experience, if that's okay.
Thank you, Delia. I think there are going to be some questions for you. I do see that there was a couple of comments. So
okay.
One was just fantastic exercise. And there was also, can we get a copy of this? So,
sure. I did send it to you guys, actually. So if you want to send it out to your list. Yep. And someone said we should all be more like dogs. And I completely agree with that sentiment.
We can practice that. That's what we're going to do next when we're ready. So, okay, so there's a question about somebody else's grief. Do you see it?
Yeah, so thoughts about how to help someone else who's in grief. It's a great question. The first advice is to not run away. We are often so distressed by other people's distress and we don't know what to do. And so we accidentally distance because we don't want to say the wrong thing. And not only we are doing this, but a lot of other people in that person's life is doing this. And because of that, sometimes people in great distress end up sort of alone because nobody wants to say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. So number one is be there. Number two is this is not the time for gratitude or positive reframing. We don't ever want to impose that on someone else who's really acutely grieving, like, well, at least ... Don't ever say that. We never want to say that because people will feel that as a minimizing of their is be there. And I think the image that I find really helpful is to imagine in our mind that we are literally walking beside them on a hike, for example. So we're not carrying them. We're not because we can't. We're not trying to take their load away from them because we can't. But they are either walking that path alone or they're walking with people who love them beside them. And whatever hard path you're on, it's always better if there's somebody that you love and care about beside you. So we have no obligation, because we can't, to make it better. You can't make it better, but you can be there. And if you don't know what to say, you know what you can say? I don't know what to say, but I love you and I care for you and I'm here for you. That's it. You can say, I don't know what to say to you, but I love you. And that in whatever words and vibe you can make that statement clear, that's really all you're trying to say. You're not trying to fix it. You're not trying to talk about it if they don't want to talk about it. You're just saying, I love you. I'm sorry. I'm here.
So I think this is, it's capacity to be in peace while you're observing somebody else's suffering or your own, right? So this is it's a skill. It's a teachable and learnable skill, and that's actually what we're going to practice in a minute or two. But before, but I think it's we often feel a need to do. This is a society that. Well, I'd say probably most natural response of anybody who has even a little bit of compassion is, can I make you feel better? Right. The problem is that there's often situations where most of the time, actually, amount of control we think we have over a given situation is typically less than what we think. And the reality is within that domain of lack of control and capacity to implement a change to fix something, limited. And so when that's the case, our presence is still valuable. And in fact, it's often a lot more valuable. In fact, often the best way to relieve suffering in such a situation is not necessarily trying to do anything, but to really ground and be present and be. The best way I can describe this is this. So those of you who know me well know that I love Rumi. And I don't know if you've known, but the way Rumi wrote all of his poems, he would hold the pole in the middle like this and just kind of walk around it. And the reason is that centering is really the cornerstone of coming to a particular internal space where you can tap into something that I can only describe as greater. or whatever you want to describe it. And in that space is where I think not only a lot of healing occurs, but more importantly, that's where we draw our strength. And that's where we can help others to draw the strength, even in the situations where seemingly, how can you help, right? If somebody close died, what can you do for that person? But you can hold them in that space, and you can let them and yourself to let the time pass where the healing will happen. So with that, let's get comfortable first. So make sure that what you're doing is, if you need to lay down, that's fine. Actually, this is not something that must be done seated. So if it's easier for you, just make sure if you're laying down, you don't want to fall asleep. Okay, I guess maybe you do want to. Like, this is presence. Presence can be sleepy too at times, especially in this way. So you have my permission to fall asleep on this. So close your eyes. And let's first center on our breaths. Just inhaling and exhaling. Begin to slow the pace of the breaths. Going to inhale into our stomachs. And the easiest way to do it is when you take a breath in, you kind of let the stomach come out, relax it. And when you exhale, you simply let the air out. The exhale is passive. And let's inhale through the nose. Exhale through the mouth. And as you exhale, see if you can find a little deeper state of relaxation, state of letting go. You may need to adjust your position a little bit. Maybe something is a little tense. You want to roll shoulders or neck, just to see if we can have body more in peace. And this practice is practice of peace. So we're finding a moment, despite, no matter what's going on in the moment of tension, we find the moment of peace. So the tension could be physical, emotional. And this is literally a continuation of what Delia was doing. So let's all take either a situation in our lives or a recent state that you've experienced that was unpleasant, or that cup that Delia was giving us as a model, something that drains you. It doesn't actually matter what comes to your mind, but try to grab first thing that comes. Don't try to analyze it. We're not here to do any kind of self-analysis. It's just the practice of releasing the tension. So you may want to, once you identify the issue, you may want to continue breathing with it. And if what came to you is the grief or sadness, that's fine. That's what came. So once you identified it, without stopping the breath, we're going to literally ask ourselves and ask the situation, ask surroundings, ask environment to become in peace. You're not asking necessarily for forgiveness. You're not asking to have the problem being taken away. You're asking for yourself to come to peace with what happened, no matter what you took, or no matter what came to you. We're actually going to use this is a typical Eastern practice of invoking a name. So salam in both Judaic and also in Arabic is a word for peace. And so while you're all staying muted, we're going to say word salam 11 times. And this is one of the ways of enhancing the internal state that we're trying to create. So we're going to inhale, salam, 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 salam. I said the word salam 11 times. So now, the same way, we're going to keep that word internally. So we're going to say it silently. We're going to inhale salam, exhale salam, and saying it to ourselves. And if you prefer to say word shalom, by all means, so we'll do that 11 breaths on your own time. This is my last breath. Now, we're going to drop the words altogether, and we're just going to stay for 11 breaths in that space that was just generated by the first two parts of the practice. Just breathing, invoking the state of peace. All right, and now the second part of this practice is a little bit more challenging. If you feel uncomfortable, you can just stop it. But the point here is one way to deepen any practice is to challenge yourself a little bit deeper into the territory that may be uncomfortable and still do the practice there. So now instead of taking what first came to your mind, actually let's spend about a minute or two identifying a state or situation that's always challenging to us, something that always throws us off, or something that causes this internal state of lack of peace. It could be something very political, if that's what triggers you. It could be something that's like a personal trait that upsets you, or trait in someone else. Just spend a minute and pick something that you know presses your buttons, and I'll tell you what we'll do next. Just think about this. This is not like necessarily the first thing that comes to your mind, and you're gonna think about this for a minute or two. So it's almost like what Elizabeth Goldberg did some months ago, called dialogue with a problem. So here it's not really dialogue, you're just finding the problem, and then we're going to do the peace practice. Okay, so if you found, basically we're doing the same. We're not going to use the words, but you're going to now go back into that state of peace you just felt a minute or two ago. You're going to sense how it feels in your body. Like, what are you actually experiencing right now? Okay, you're feeling state of relief? Are you feeling just a state of you comfortable sitting in a chair, your buttocks are touching the bottom of the chair, your back is touching the back? It feels natural to sit this way. It feels comfortable. It feels that you're relaxed. Maybe you felt that your forehead has gotten a little softer and you don't carry tension there, or whatever you feel. So take that sensation and now merge it with this problem. Now, when you think of a problem, likely you're going to tense up, or you're going to experience some shift. Your attention just stays on a piece, stays on the way the practice shifted you. And we'll begin with just the slow breathing in and out. So we kind of, if it helps, inhale peace, exhale peace in any language you want to say. And start there. So now, what I invite you to sense, I'm going to say the following universal truth. There's always a part in us that's constantly in a complete and deep and utter peace. No matter what happens around us, that part is always in a balanced state. Now, we may not be able to connect to that part right away. We may not be able to operate out of that place all the time, or maybe most of the time, but it's always there. That's kind of we can call it a soul, We can call it awareness. We can call it peace. Whatever you're calling it, it doesn't matter. That part is always there. And when we practice intentionality on centering on the peace, we're getting a little closer to that state. We're getting closer to being more aware of that part of us that is in that depth of the peace. A great analogy is the depth of the ocean. Like when we dive on the surface, there could be all kinds of waves and bad weather. But if you go just a few hundred feet down below, there's a complete silence, complete stillness. It's same with us. There's always this place in us that's always constantly still, totally in peace. If you never experienced that, that's no problem. I mean, actually, most of us never experienced that, and it only comes in certain places. But think of it then when you're falling asleep and you're no longer aware of the surroundings. That state is there. Actually, that state is always there, right? So let's stay trying to connect to it. Maintain a slow-paced breath. The breath is actually one of the most grounding exercises we can do, and it can bring us in much deeper contact with this soul space, let's call it the peace space. If you have distracting thoughts or sensations, maybe an ache, an itch, just an unpleasant thought, don't push it away, just experience it, let it come. But ultimately, you're trying to concentrate on this state of peace. Mind often will find disturbances, but try to throw us off. That's why we have to practice. Let's slowly begin to come back. Noise. Let's just do this. So kind of take your hands and just slowly do the rubbing for a second. You have glasses, you can take them off. Just put your hands over the face and move the facial muscles a little bit. I find that for myself, this exercise often causes me to realize how much tension I carry in the face. And so I kind of like to, at the end of this exercise, release all the tension from the face. Take a second. Thank you, everybody. Hope you feel a little refreshed and more comfortable with challenging areas of our lives, with grief, with state of sadness. So, and this was planned this way, by the way, if you want to. We planned this activity this way. I hope that Delia can come back one day. I think actually practices that challenging us often the ones that grow us the most. And before we go, Taylor, thank you so much. Janet, what do we have next week?
Next week, we have the return of Lucy Gable, who is the owner of Lucy Fit and an adjunct faculty member now at the GW School of Medicine and Health Sciences. And for the first time, we'll have Susan Mondi Bowen, who is a yoga master, and she's the founder of Thrive Studio. And
she's also my yoga instructor, so I'm very excited about that.
And she will be doing our mind-body practice.
I did recruit her.
Kudos. Great.
And that's it.
All right. Well, everybody, happy Veterans Day. If you, my father-in-law is a veteran, so I'm going to call him a little later today, even though I'm not going to see him this weekend. I'll see him next time. See you next Friday. Bye, everybody.